In this video, I'm going to walk through a problem where I'm going to use a Venn diagram to find my probabilities. And why I want to do this is to point out some of the differences when tackling a Venn diagram versus a contingency table, because Venn diagrams don't have totals. They just have a bunch of numbers. So I have a bunch of numbers, and I often have to do more totaling in order to find that probability. And so I'm a little less reliant on the particular types and their formula, and more just going off of that general rule of number of ways the event can and does occur and the total number of outcomes. And if I just keep that in mind, I'm going to be able to do this all. And then focus on what sections of the Venn diagram is each phrase talking about. So this would be one where you want to have that note sheet out where we highlighted the regions of the Venn diagram as we sort of work through stuff. All right. And so I'm going to show out here things I added to get final answers, just so you have a sense of where numbers are coming from. Okay, so this first one, we are asked the probability that someone plays the piano. And just a reminder, there were 300 total people in this Venn diagram. We made it, so that's how I know without adding all the numbers. So I'm going to know that just to make my life a little easier. All right, so we have the probability of piano. And so that's anyone who fits in this piano circle. Now this is going to be a little, it's like if this was a contingency table, I'd already have that total, but I don't here. So that means I have to add the 42, the 22, the 20, and the 26, the four numbers in that circle to get my probability. And this is one of those ones where I always say, you are welcome to leave the four numbers unadded, or if you prefer, you can add them together. But we like to keep that fraction unsimplified so that we can sort of see, I can see if you understand where the numbers are coming from. And that of the people who were surveyed, 36.7% likelihood that they play the piano. Okay, now the next one says piano only. So that's going to be a little simpler because piano only I won't need to add because that's just the 42. And so that's going to be 42 out of 300. And for not all, I'm not going to convert all of these into percents. If you want to go back, you can look at my written solutions and see the percents. For this video, I'm going to focus on those fractions. Okay, next up, I have piano and guitar. And I'm going to just write P and G to save myself some writing. Okay, so this is an overlap. So remember the guitar is right here. And so piano and guitar would be the number in that overlap region right there, which is the 20 and the 26. So I would add 20 plus 26 out of that 300. And so that's 46 out of 300. Moving right along versus piano and guitar only. Remember, now we're ruling out anything in the drum circle. So that 20 now goes away, and it's just the 26 out of 300. So this should be similar to some of the earlier problems where we were practicing just pulling those numbers from the Venn diagram and writing percentages. Guess what? It's the same thing. We're just giving this a new name. Now, instead of asking what's the percentage of people who fit in that group, I'm sort of now just changing the question to what's the likelihood that someone plays the piano and guitar only who's at this Taylor Swift concert. Okay, 5, piano or guitar. So remember, this one is where that formula really doesn't come into play. If I tried to just total piano and total guitar and then subtract the overlap, I'm doing more work than I need to. With an or situation, remember, it's anyone who plays piano, anyone who plays guitar, or anyone who plays both. And so the easiest way to think about this, notice I gave myself a really long fraction bar, is I'm going to be adding all 6 of those numbers together. The 22, the 42, the 20, the 26. So those are all the people who play piano. And so it's like piano only is here, or piano outside of the guitar circle. the overlap, and then the 30 plus the 70, which are the people who play guitar but not piano. And then that's all over my total of 300. And so notice there's no subtraction involved, because we get really wrapped up sometimes in like, oh, it's an OR, I have this formula, I need to use it. And then I get to a Venn diagram and it's like, oh, actually I don't. I need to just think about what is the region described by OR. And remember, OR is everything in those circles. And so we want to not forget those things. Okay, probability they play at least one of these instruments and the probability they play none of these instruments. I'm actually going to start with 7. The probability that they play none. Well, that's going to be the people on the outside, so the 36 out of 300. Now, the reason why I said I wanted to come back to 6, the probability of at least 1, is if you remember that at least 1 is everything in the circles, and the 36 is everything outside. So if we look at everyone, that's 100% of the time. Well, if 36 out of 300 is none, then at least 1 is everyone else. So one way you could find this is 1 minus that 36 out of 300. So you're basically saying if everyone together is 100% of the time, I'm going to take out those 36 out of 300, and then I have everyone that's left. You could also think of this another way is, instead of adding up all the numbers in the circle, I'm just going to subtract out my 36. And I would get 264 out of 300. Or the final other option is I could add up all the numbers in the circle. It's just a lot of numbers to add. So sometimes I like to use the other parts to sort of help me figure that out. All right, last but not least is our conditional one. So given that a person plays the piano, so this means I'm not looking at everything. I'm only focused on this piano circle. So if we remember, we already know that 110 people play the piano. So that's going to be my new total. I want to know that the person also plays the guitar. So if I'm making this notation-wise, I would have guitar given piano. That would be sort of my notation. And so remember the piano total, and I'm just going to rephrase, put that, we found it by doing the 42 plus the 22 plus the 20 plus the 26, in case you're like looking back and like, where did that 110 come from? So those are the piano players. And of those piano players, 20 plus 26 played guitar, or 46. So that's sort of how do I use my subgroup probability or when it's within a Venn diagram. So notice with all of these, I didn't refer back to any of the formulas beyond how many are in that group versus the total. And so that's really the big one you need to walk away with from probability. If you want to memorize those other formulas, great, but probably what's going to be more helpful is just generally understanding what is meant by or, what is meant by and, what is meant by only, and then how do I find those in Venn diagrams. Hopefully this helps you better understand how we can find probability when we have a Venn diagram.